I want you to picture something for a second. Just uh, imagine dropping a 2,500-year-old ancient Greek philosopher right into the middle of a modern boarding school dining hall.
Oh, he would definitely run for the hills.
Right. I mean, just picture that collision of worlds. You've got the noise, the hormones, the shifting social dynamics.
Yeah, absolute chaos.
Just 100 teenagers trying to figure out who they are at the exact same time. But the crazy thing is, Heraclitus might actually be the only person in that room who truly understands what's going on.
He really would. And I mean, it is a striking image, right? We tend to separate this ancient deliberate philosophy from the hyper-stimulated reality of modern student life.
They feel like totally different universes.
Exactly. But when you look at the actual architecture of a boarding environment, the constant collision of new routines, evolving hierarchies, academic pressure, it actually serves as the ultimate proving ground for his foundational premise.
Which is the idea that everything, the entire universe, is just in a state of continuous, unavoidable flux.
Always changing.
Always. And for you, the learner, that is exactly our mission for today's deep dive. We're unpacking this fascinating document called What a Boarder Can Learn from Heraclitus.
Such a great text.
It really is. We're looking at how dropping this ancient framework into the modern boarding experience completely redefines resilience. It's not just about, like, surviving school anymore.
Right. It's about understanding the mechanics of how identity is forged, especially in an environment that literally never stops moving.
Yeah, because boarding life is a whirlwind.
Yeah.
So where do we even start with this?
Well, to really get it, we first have to look at this massive psychological trap. And it's one that almost everyone falls into, honestly, not just students.
What is it?
It's the illusion of the finish line.
Oh, right.
We operate under this ingrained assumption that development is, linear, finite. We think, if I just get through this one difficult week, or if I just make it to the next year group,
Then I'm done.
Yeah.
I'll finally be confident and settled and certain all the time.
Exactly. We just wait for the plateau.
We wait for that magical moment where everything feels easy. But, I mean, why do we do that? Why is our baseline human instinct to just seek out a state where nothing changes?
What's fascinating here is that it basically comes down to cognitive energy conservation.
Okay. Meaning what exactly?
Meaning the human brain is inherently wired to seek homeostasis, a stable, predictable state, because familiarity takes very little processing power.
Oh, sure. You're just on autopilot.
Right. When you know your environment, your social standing, your schedule, your brain gets to rest. But when things change, your brain interprets that loss of familiarity as a potential threat.
So it freaks out a little bit.
Exactly. It suddenly demands this immense amount of cognitive energy to process all these new variables, and that manifests physically and emotionally as anxiety. Or exhaustion.
And discomfort,
Yeah.
which makes perfect sense from an evolutionary standpoint, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you're safe in a familiar cave, a sudden change usually means a predator is coming.
Yeah, change literally meant danger.
But translating that to a modern student's life creates just massive friction, because cognitive and emotional growth inherently requires leaving that comfortable homeostasis behind. Moving into a new year group, adjusting to way harder academics, navigating friend groups that keep shifting. You literally cannot remain perfectly comfortable and develop independence at the same time.
You really can't. And this is where Heraclitus steps in. He's famous for this concept. You've probably heard it summarized as, no man ever steps in the same river twice.
By classic quote.
But the crucial part of that philosophy isn't just that the river is flowing. The full thought is, for it's not the same river, and he's not the same man.
Okay, let's unpack this, because that second half, he's not the same man. That is huge.
It really is.
Because in a boarding house, the environment is the river, right?
Okay.
And it is constantly shifting. Students are moving dorms, the academic pressure spikes, friend groups fracture and reform. That's the water moving.
Exactly. But the student is fundamentally changing too. I mean, biologically, a teenager's brain is undergoing massive structural rewiring.
Oh, completely.
They are literally shedding old neural pathways and building new ones. They are a totally different biological and emotional entity from one term to the next.
Which means the friction they're feeling, that exhaustion or anxiety, isn't actually a sign that something is going wrong.
No, not at all. It is the literal physical sensation of neuroplasticity in action.
Wow.
But when a student feels deeply unsettled by, say, a new academic challenge, they almost always interpret that discomfort as a failure.
Yeah, they think, I should be able to handle this. I should feel settled by now.
Right. But Heraclitus reframes that. Development is not supposed to be comfortable. That unsettling feeling is the exact evidence of progress.
I love that. It just changes the entire paradigm. I mean, we treat our lives like a finished house that we just need to decorate.
Yeah, like the walls are up and the roof is on.
Exactly. And we expect the inside to be super quiet and peaceful. But really, Heraclitus is telling us we are an active construction site. And living in a construction site means there's noise, there's dust flying everywhere, walls are being knocked down. It's inherently going to feel unsettling.
It is. But I actually want to push that analogy a bit further.
Oh, go for it.
Because the concept of a construction site still implies that there's a finished house at the end of the project. Like there's a final blueprint.
Right.
Heraclitus would argue that you are never a finished house. You are the act of building itself. You're the verb, not the noun.
Wait, so the goal isn't to eventually finish the house. The goal is just to get better at the act of building.
Precisely. If your baseline expectation is that you're supposed to be a finished, perfect house, the noise and the dust of daily life will just constantly make you feel like a failure.
You just spend all your energy trying to sweep up the dust.
Yes, rather than laying the next brick. But if you accept that change is the process, that you are just ongoing construction, the noise just becomes the soundtrack of your development.
That is such a powerful shift. But it brings up a really big question about how we actually apply this.
Okay, what's the question?
Well, if change is constant, and if the human brain naturally interprets change as a threat that burns all this energy, how do students survive this without just living in a state of constant vibrating anxiety?
That is the million-dollar question.
Right. I mean, if the river literally never stops flowing, how do you keep from drowning?
You have to fundamentally alter the cognitive framework you use to process the change. You have to move from a defensive posture to an adaptive one.
Because right now, most of us view change as a problem.
Exactly. And when change is a problem, our instinct is resistance. We try to stop it. We sit there asking, why is this happening? Why won't things just stay the way they were?
Which is such a helpless question.
Yeah.
Asking, why is everything changing while you're in a boarding school is like standing in the ocean and asking, why is the water moving?
It doesn't stop the wave.
No, it just guarantees that you're going to take the full force of the impact while standing completely rigid. You're just getting battered by the waves.
And that resistance generates a massive secondary layer of anxiety. So now you have the stress of the change plus the stress of fighting reality.
Oof, yeah.
The Heraclitean approach, which, by the way, aligns perfectly with modern cognitive behavioral therapy, is to shift the internal question.
Okay.
Instead of asking, why is everything changing? The source text gives us this golden question. Students need to ask, what is this change helping me become?
Oh, wow. What is this change helping me become? That's the shift from standing rigid in the water to learning how to surf.
Exactly. You're looking at the wave and recognizing it as momentum, not just a threat.
You're using the energy of the change.
Yes, it's the cognitive mechanism of reframing a threat into a challenge. When you ask what it's helping you become, you immediately engage the prefrontal cortex. You move out of the emotional reactive brain and into problem solving.
And a boarding house practically forces you to build this adaptability. You don't have the option to just avoid the friction.
No, you really don't.
Like if your group dynamic shifts or you get a new housemaster with totally different expectations, you can't just leave. You have to navigate it. You find solutions instead of just focusing on the frustration.
Which is actively building a life skill. Living in that environment teaches you how to respond calmly to uncertainty.
Because you're going to need that later, right?
Absolutely. They are developing the psychological flexibility required for everything that comes next. University, complex careers, adult relationships. They're learning how to maintain their balance while the ground is moving.
But, okay, here's where it gets really interesting. I want to push back on this idea of constant, unending flux.
Okay, let's hear it.
Because if literally everything is in motion, if the school environment is changing, their biology is changing, their friendships are changing, how do they not just burn out from the sheer chaos of it all?
It sounds exhausting, right?
It does. If everything is an ocean wave, where's the dry land? How do students actually build a core identity if everything is just relentless ambiguity?
That is the critical tension in this entire philosophy, and the text addresses this through what we call the paradox of stability.
The paradox of stability,
This
meaning
it.
stability exists within the change.
Yes. While Heraclitus argued everything is in flux, He also believed in the logos, this underlying order or logic that governs the change. Change isn't just random, chaotic explosions.
Right.
It happens within a structure.
Okay, so how does that abstract Greek philosophy actually look on a Tuesday afternoon in a dorm room?
It looks like supportive structures, bounded environments. While the internal and social lives of the students are swirling in constant development, the boarding house provides this rigid external scaffolding.
Ah, I see.
Think about the anchors they have. Predictable routines, specific times for meals, mandatory study periods, clear expectations.
It's the physical scaffolding around the active construction site.
Exactly. And neurologically, that scaffolding is a lifesaver. Because the baseline routine is predictable, the student's brain doesn't have to burn energy figuring out when to eat or where they need to be at 9 a.m.
They can offload all of those basic logistical questions onto the environment.
Yes. By offloading those routines, they preserve their cognitive surplus. They save their mental energy for the actual hard work of navigating the flux.
Like figuring out their personal values or managing a tough academic subject.
Right. The stability of the environment creates a safe space for the volatility of personal growth.
And that makes the role of the staff so clear. The teachers, the housemasters, they aren't there to stop the change. They can't stop the river.
No, they are there to maintain the integrity of the scaffolding. They provide a consistent, supportive relationship.
Because when everything inside feels like chaos, having an adult whose reactions are predictable gives the student the psychological safety to actually take risks and mature.
It's controlled friction. It forces adaptation but prevents the student from drowning. Plus, going through this alongside 100 other teenagers experiencing the exact same disorientation, it creates a profound shared sense of belonging.
They're all in the same river together.
Exactly.
So synthesizing all of this, taking this ancient concept of continuous change and dropping it into the modern pressure cooker of a student boarding house, what does this all mean? How does this change things for them?
Well, it relieves them of the impossible burden of having to arrive. When students understand that change is an essential part of learning, it alters how they evaluate their own success. They can approach new experiences with curiosity rather than fear.
Because a moment of disorientation isn't a failure, it's just the next wave.
Right. And the ultimate comforting takeaway from the text is simply this. You are not expected to have everything figured out. You are expected to grow.
I love that.
Life is moving forward, and so are we. The person you are today is not the person you will always be. And that is a really exciting journey.
It takes so much sting out of the growing pains. But, the text also notes that students may not fully recognize these changes in the moment. When you're in the thick of it, it just feels like exhaustion.
Oh, totally. The brain is too busy managing the present friction to see the big picture. It's usually only in retrospect that you realize your baseline capacity has increased.
Which brings me to a final thought for you, the learner. We've spent this deep dive exploring how resisting change generates exhaustion and how embracing the flux actually builds resilience. So think about an unsettling change or a difficult transition you are facing right now in your own life. You are likely feeling that exact discomfort, that exact laws of homeostasis we've been talking about.
It's completely natural to feel that way.
It is. But since growth is often invisible in the moment, how might a future version of yourself, who has already adapted and grown from this exact experience, look back on the unsettling challenge you were sitting with today?